Edo State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal sitting in Abuja on Monday struck out all motions filed by both the petitioners and respondents in the case brought by the People's Democratic Party (PDP) and its candidate Asue Ighodalo, challenging the victory of the All Progressives Congress (APC) candidate Senator Monday Okpebholo. During the tribunal proceedings, Kanu Agbabi-San, counsel to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC), urged the tribunal to dismiss the petition, describing it as an academic exercise without legal merit. APC's lead counsel, Emmanuel Ukala-San, urged that the petitioner's case is based on allegations of non-compliance with electoral laws, particularly overvoting, citing Ucha v. Elechi. He stressed that the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that the petitioners must prove overvoting unit by unit, ward by ward, and local government by local government. He also referenced Baba v. INEC, which held that merely submitting documents without proper tendering renders them useless. Ukala further noted that the evidence presented by the petitioner's witnesses, PW1 to PW14, was either hearsay or laced with hearsay, making it legally inadmissible. He emphasized that Form EC25D, a crucial election document, was not referenced in any of the petitioner's witness statements on oath. Additionally, he pointed out that the petitioners failed to demonstrate the Bimotor Voters Accreditation System (BVAS) data or voters register to substantiate their claims. In light of these shortcomings, he urged the tribunal to dismiss the petition, urging that no concrete evidence has been laid to support the allegations against the APC and Okpebholo. The three-man tribunal headed by Justice Wilfred Pochi adjourned for judgment after parties had adopted their final written addresses. Wilfred said the date for the judgment could be communicated to the parties and their counsels.
I mean, from the submissions of the INEC lawyer, the APC lawyer, and the governor's lawyer, it is very clear that the plaintiff, the complainant, as a matter of habit, they have to complain. It is he who alleged, who has to prove it. And I reminded them informally when the court adjourned. But in each unit you complain there is a problem, an eyewitness in that unit must be called upon to prove his statement on oath. So if you allege that there were 700, you have complaints over 700 units, and you also allege, in the end, you inform the court that you are going to tender or produce about 170 witnesses, and in the end, you produce less than 20. Assuming, without conceding, that everything those witnesses says in respect of those specific branches were considered to them, you did not devote to those areas. So I am very satisfied, not based on any other thing, but based on what the summary of what had transpired during the trial and the written addresses by all the counsels.
Initially, the petitioners, which is the PDP, said they had motions. Motions. Also, the third respondent, which is APC, they said they have motions. But looking at it, they now decided that no, there's no point going to these applications because it will not be beneficial to any of these parties, and it will add to the burden of the judges. So what did they now do? They now decided to withdraw all the motions, and they went into the adoption of written addresses. The respondents, we were talking about the INEC, the governor, and the APC, their adoption of addresses and adoption were articulate and quite straight to the point. You see, this is a petition that we have already said it is dead on arrival. And now, you are saying we have 4,519 polling units in Edo State. You are challenging 765 polling units. That represents 16.7% of the total polling units. That is their own final submission of their written addresses. They now considered that 50 polling units that they suspected to be that they had overvoted were actually cancelled at the polling units, and that is this unit that they were also asking the tribunal to nullify. You cannot put something on nothing and expect it to stand. It is not possible. And that is why we have told the public that APC, the governor, they're on the go. Nothing stopping them. We are aiming at victory, and we know come very soon that judgment will be declared.
Faith Dibia reporting for Afrima Reporters TV.
The Edo State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal seat in Abuja had adjourned indefinitely and to communicate a date for judgment to parties. BTV News senior reporter Best Orator reports that while the INEC, AOC and Senator Monday Okwebelo prayed the tribunal to dismiss the petition, the petitioners are praying the tribunal to grant the petition. The report.
The court was filled to capacity as interested parties, counsel and their team members, as well as others, besieged the tribunal for the adoption of final written addresses. Counsel to the petitioners, Adetuji Oyeyipo SAN, told the tribunal that there have been a lot of processes filed and that they want to seek the court's direction on what next to do. The tribunal then directed that the motion should be taken first, since the motions are ripe for hearing before the adoption of the final written addresses. Tribunal said if they have their way, there will be no need for any motion to be moved before the final written address, because they find themselves with the greatest misfortune of loss of documents before them. Counsel to Senator Monday Okwebelo SAN then said the motions are not necessary at this case and advised that counsel should withdraw the motions to avoid wasting the precious time of the tribunal. After a little deliberation, lead counsel to parties thereafter agreed to withdraw their motions after consultation. The tribunal thereafter struck out all the pending motions. After this, the coast was clear for the adoption of the final written address, and 15 minutes was agreed for parties to deliberate on the motion, while the petitioners were given 30 minutes. Counsel to INEC Kanu Agabi SAN said 17 February 2025, their final written address was filed and their reply on point of law was dated and filed on the 27th February 2025. He adopted the processes and relied on them in urging the tribunal to dismiss the petition for incompetence and lack of proof. Agabi SAN said in paragraphs 4.1 of their address, they stated that the tribunal cannot annul the petition as it is not the relief sought by the petitioners. He said the second point is that the tribunal cannot declare Alson Ighodalo winner by the assertion in that the election was invalid. The third point is that the grounds of non-compliance pleaded by the petitioners is not accompanied by consequential relief in their petition. And the fourth reason why the petition should be dismissed is on the grounds of majority of the lawful vote pleaded by the petitioners, and that cannot be availed to them because they said that the election is invalid. The fifth point in his address is that the number of polling unit agents called by the petitioners is insignificant compared to the number of polling units in Edo State. The sixth point is that the polling unit agents called as witnesses all signed the result sheet in substantial compliance to the electoral laws. And the seventh reason is that the documents of which the petitioners relied upon to prove their case were all dumped in the tribunal and cannot avail them. And number 8 is that the case of the petitioner is founded on analysis undertaken by consultants. The ninth reason being that the results were duly collated at all levels of collation. 10th is that the petitioners have not pleaded any alternative results on the basis that they would be declared the winner. And the 11th, according to him, it is to the effect that the petitioners have not tendered the results that they challenge but were dumped on the tribunal. The 12th is that the witnesses have distinguished between what they were told and what they saw, and the evidence of such witness is irrelevant according to Supreme Court past judgment, which he said the petitioners conceded because they did not reply to it on their address. He said 4 of the issues raised in the address were conceded by the petitioners. On his part, Onyechi Ikpeazu SAN counsel to Senator Monday Okwebelo said they filed 6 processes and that they are relying on all the documents to dismiss the petition. The first point is that the petition is indeed an academic exercise, and in doing so, they carefully extracted the polling units. The petitioners never tendered documents and enumerated the number of votes, and even without going into any other grounds, Okwebelo is still way ahead and won the election by the petitioners showing or tabulation. He said looking at the merits of the case with respect to non-prior filling of the serial number in forms EC25B, that the serial numbers of the sensitive materials must be given, urged the tribunal to look at the said forms EC25B and that all that is required is quantity received and quantity returned on the election materials enumerated thereon. He said happily they had tendered forms EC 40A, and on forms EC 25B, the third item to be stated is ballot papers, and that if it is the only forms that should state the serial numbers of ballot papers, there should not be any other paper, adding that looking at EC 40A under Part A is a form for the requirement for the serial numbers of ballot papers to be stated, not in Form EC 25B. He said in the petitioner's exhibit PCB 1 to PCB 308, 3 pages were missing on it, and said where then is the forms ECA 25B that should bear the serial numbers that they are looking for, which the petitioners pleaded and listed, and they did not tender them. Ikpeazu said on the issue of overvoting, the Supreme Court has said that the issue of overvoting cannot be proven without the beavers machine. He said none of the beavers brought to the court were opened. He said they tendered 2 items, PJA1, which is the beavers report, and beavers screenshot, and that those documents have been pronounced by the Supreme Court that such document does not translate into beavers machines. He said unsigned documents have no probative value in a plethora of cases by the Supreme Court. On his part, counsel to APC, Emmanuel Kala-Essence, also told the tribunal to dismiss the petition, adopting his final written address. Ukala-Essence, counsel to APC, said the case of the petitioner is entirely based on non-compliance. He said the Supreme Court has over the years laid down the provision of the law that the petitioners should prove the issue of overvoting by unit to unit, ward to ward, and local government to local government, according to the Supreme Court's case of Uche versus Elechi, where a petitioner complained of overvoting. He should prove it poly unit by poly unit, wards by wards, and even local government by local government. He said even if the petition is based on Section 73 of non-prior recording, the petitioners owes it a duty to prove it. In the case of Baba versus INEC, the Supreme Court, according to him, said the appellant has enormous duty to prove poly unit to poly unit, word to word, and that the documents the petitioners are relying on were only dumped in court and the documents remains useless. He says Section 73 of the Electoral Act does not create an exception, which is that to the effect that only those who participated in the election can testify from the poly unit. Again, he said, the case of Baba versus INEC, the Supreme Court said, consider views notwithstanding Section 73 of the Electoral Act, the petitioners is to demonstrate oral evidence clearly demonstrating provisions of the Electoral Act, and that from the evidence led, only 5 poly unit agents were called to testify in the entire state with over 4,000 poly units, and no single presiding officer was called. He said the law is well settled that any evidence outside the oral evidence of the poly unit agent or presiding officer's evidence is regarded as a hearsay evidence. He said the evidence of PW1 to PW14 of the petitioners, none of their evidence is useful as it is a hearsay evidence or evidence laced with hearsay, and urged the tribunal to dismiss the petition because no concrete evidence was laid, more so that forms EC 25D was not mentioned in any of the petitioner's witness statement on oath, just as he said that they did not demonstrate the beavers and voters register by the petitioners, and the case of the petitioners was not proven. Also adopting his final written address, counsel to the petitioners, Ken Mosiah-Essence, said they filed their final written address and reply on point of law to all the respondents. Mosiah-Essence adopted the address and processes listed and urged the tribunal to firmly determine the petition, which has been successfully established, to grant the prayers sought. He said by way of settlement of preliminary issues that out of 4,519 poly units in Edo State, the complaint in the petition is against 765 poly units. He said in Hope Uzodima's case, he was challenging around 800 poly units results out of the over 6,000 poly units, and said that the law cannot change in the case of Aswen Ighodalo. He said the second position is that a petition must be holistically considered and that the petition was founded on several grounds and the cumulative effect on the grounds is what matters, and prayed for a determination that isolated grounds are submitting that such grounds taken alone will not have the effect of the reversing of the declaration made, and that the petition is academic according to the respondent is also not well founded. The third point is that on the issue of appropriate forms for non-prior recording of serial numbers and other details of sensitive electoral materials is the simplest issue for resolution. He submitted that the forms is a specific prescription for a manual. Ken Mosiah-Essence said it is pertinent to inform the tribunal that the second respondent did not plead any alternative forms for EC 25D, and they should not say anything contrary about it, and whatever they said amounts to no issue. He also stated that they, as petitioners, considered that due election took place in the polling unit, but their case was a collation where figures were inflicted at the ward and local government levels, and that they presented both documents to prove their case. Petitioners' counsel said all the documents they tendered were duly certified by INEC and were tendered and without objection by INEC, the maker of the document. He said prior recording does not take place at the polling unit but at the registration area centers (RACs), and no pleading in evidence that polling unit agents took part in that act, and that to say that they should call polling unit agents to speak about it is uncalled for. He said the primacy of IREF have been affirmed by the Supreme Court. Mosiah SN said they brought 125 IREF results, which is an alternative, and the issue of stamp, which was raised by the respondents, was as a result of document tendered by agents, not against certified true copies of IRF results, and urged the tribunal to grant the petition. Reacting, Honorable Ogbede Faluyi-Sibo, spokesperson for the petitioner, said they were pleased by the presentation of their counsel and expressed the belief that the tribunal will grant the petition.
INEC failed to submit herself to her own guidelines. So altogether, we petitioned 756 polling units out of the 4,000 plus polling units. And we were glad to state before the tribunal in our deliberations that in the cases of Kennedy versus INEC, in the cases of Baba versus INEC, and also Johnson versus INEC, the Supreme Court concluded that the percentage of witnesses brought before the court does not determine the overall outcome, as long as the witnesses were able to substantiate the evidence. So for us, we are pleased with the proceedings, and we are hopeful that very soon we will hear from the Secretary of the Tribunal the next date for the court's judgment. Thank you.
Senator Adams Oshomole, who was at the tribunal throughout the period of the adoption, said the petitioners are praying the tribunal to help them execute their case by saying that the tribunal should take a holistic view of the petition when they only dumped documents in court and could not prove their case.
If you allege that there were 700, you have complaints over 700 units, and you also allege in the end you inform the court that you are going to tender or produce about 170 witnesses, and in the end you produce less than 20. Assuming without conceding that everything those witnesses says in respect of those specific branches were considered to them, you did not devote in those areas. As our counsel rightly said, it's like taking a bucket of water from the ocean. It doesn't affect the level.
APC chairman in Edo State, Emperor Jared Tenebe, and the party's legal advisor, Stephen Okoro, said the petitioner's case died on arrival.
It is very clear, and I'm very, very, very sure, for wasting the time of everybody and the court, I'm sure there's going to be consequences by maybe fining them to pay some certain amount. You can see their lawyers struggling in their final address. All they are doing is to see how they can, knowing fully whether they are going to lose the case, see how they can cajole Aswe Godalo so that they take him to appeal so that they extract more money from him. So this case is dead on arrival, and APC, you're already happy. Thank you.
Witnesses were only called 19. Out of these 19 witnesses, 14 were ward and local government collation agents. You only called 5 polling unit agents. The courts cannot perform magic at this Christmas. They are not for that Christmas. This petition died on arrival.
The tribunal is now at its final stage. The much-awaited adoption of final written addresses by the petitioners and the respondents is finally come and gone. At this stage, all eyes are now on the Justice Wilfred Pochi-led 3-man panel of the Edo State Governorship Election Petitions Tribunal to do justice to the petition. Well, what are people to expect from this petition? Parties have argued their case in the final address, while the petitioners are saying that the tribunal should upturn the election of Senator Monday Okpebholo. The respondents are equally saying that the petition before the tribunal are more like an academic exercise, as the petitioners could not prove their case, only called 19 witnesses and 5 being polling unit agents, who also did not interact with the BVAS machine. And also, it was observed that the petitioners themselves did not mention anything about the BVAS machine, but said they were relying on the certified true copy of RF and other documents. However, the tribunal has adjourned to a date that will be communicated to parties for judgment. From the National Judicial Institute, venue of the Edo State Governorship Election Petitions Tribunal, sitting here in Abuja, the nation's capital, Best Orator, reporting for BTV News.